The day I became the most hated man in my neighborhood was the same day I became its most powerful. $500. That's the fine our HOA president, a woman I'll call Linda, decided to hit me with for fishing with my grieving daughter. What she didn't know was that I dismantle bullies for a living, and I had more than enough spite to see this through to the end. If you've ever had to deal with a power-tripping HOA board, I guarantee this story will feel very familiar. My name is Ethan Crowell, and until about 6 months ago, I was living a pretty good life. I'd spent my career in venture capital, and after a few successful exits, I had enough money to walk away and focus on what mattered. But life has a way of reminding you that money isn't everything. My wife, Annalise, lost her battle with cancer, leaving me to raise our daughter, Mila. The grief was like a fog, and the only thing that seemed to cut through it, even for a moment, was fishing. It was the last thing the three of us really enjoyed together before she was gone. So when I decided we needed a fresh start, my search was laser-focused. I wasn't just looking for a house. I was looking for a sanctuary with water. A place where Mila and I could cast a line, and maybe, just maybe, find our way back to ourselves. The Whispering Bluffs community looked like a postcard from a better life. The online gallery showed stunning homes, perfect green lawns, and at the heart of it all, a beautiful, serene lake that seemed to promise tranquility. It was the only place I considered. During the tour, the realtor couldn't stop gushing about the amenities. "It's a wonderful, tight-knit community," she'd said. I specifically asked about the lake activities, and she waved a hand towards it. "Oh, swimming, kayaking, fishing. It's the jewel of the neighborhood." She did pause, though, as we were signing the initial paperwork. "I should mention, the Homeowners Association is very active. The HOA president, Linda Prescott, is incredibly dedicated." She chose the word carefully, a slight flicker in her eyes that I should have paid more attention to. She even shared a quick story about Linda measuring the height of someone's mailbox with a tape measure. At the time, I just laughed it off. I'd spent 2 decades staring down founders, lawyers, and corporate sharks in high-stakes negotiations. How bad could one neighborhood bureaucrat really be? That was a catastrophic miscalculation. Our first truly good day happened on a quiet Saturday morning. The sun was warm, the water was like glass, and Mila and I were sitting on the edge of a small wooden dock. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I heard her genuinely laugh, a sound I had missed more than air. She'd just reeled in a tiny, glittering sunfish, holding it up with a look of pure, unadulterated pride. That was the moment the silence was shattered by a voice as sharp as broken glass. "Excuse me, but what exactly do you think you're doing?" The woman marching towards us was probably in her late 50s, with a severe haircut that looked like it could score granite, and an expression that suggested she'd just caught us dumping chemical waste. She wasn't carrying a purse. She was armed with a clipboard. "Good morning," I said, forcing a friendly tone and nudging Mila to gently release the fish. "Just enjoying a bit of fishing with my daughter. I'm Ethan Crowell, my daughter Mila. We just moved into the blue house on Cedar Drive." I stood up and offered my hand. She stared at my outstretched hand as if it were covered in swamp filth before completely ignoring it. "Mr. Crowell," she snapped, her eyes raking over our simple fishing gear with undisguised contempt. "Fishing is explicitly prohibited in Whisperwind Lake. This is a direct violation of Section 8, Subsection C of the HOA regulations. I'm Linda Prescott, the HOA president." She announced her title like she was revealing a royal lineage. "I'm afraid I'll have to issue you a violation. The fine is $500. I felt Mila flinch and shrink behind me. Her joyful energy vanished, replaced by fear. "Hold on, there must be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice level. "We just bought the house. The realtor made a point of telling us fishing was a key amenity. It was one of the main reasons we chose this community." A thin, cold smile touched Linda's lips. "The rules were updated 2 months ago to preserve the lake's aesthetic harmony. An email was sent to all registered homeowners. Ignorance of the bylaws doesn't exempt you from following them. My entire professional life revolves around my inbox. I never miss an important email. I never received an email about a rule change, I stated plainly. I'm usually very diligent about that. Can I ask what the reasoning was? Was there an ecological study done? She scoffed, a little puff of air. Environmental concerns, of course. And we've had complaints about the smell of fish disturbing residents during their morning coffee. Not everyone wants to see this sort of activity, she said, gesturing to our single fishing rod. Her tone made it clear this wasn't about a rule. It was about us. Perhaps you don't understand how things work here, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. We maintain certain standards. New residents sometimes struggle to adapt. The message was clear. We weren't their kind of people. I was about to unleash a career's worth of verbal takedowns when I heard a little sniffle. I looked down and saw tears welling in Mila's eyes. Her perfect morning, our first step towards healing, had just been deliberately poisoned by this woman. In that instant, my priorities snapped into focus. We'll pack up, I said quietly, wrapping my arm around Mila's shoulders. Please send me an official notice with the details of the fine and a link to the updated bylaws you mentioned. Linda's victorious smile returned. Excellent. I'm glad we understand each other. She made a note on her clipboard, turned with military precision, and marched away. The joy of the morning was gone, replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. That fine wasn't about money. She had used her petty authority to hurt my daughter to assert her dominance. As we walked home, Mila's hand clutching mine, the deep fog of grief I'd been carrying for 6 months began to burn away, replaced by a cold, clear, and focused resolve. Linda Prescott had just declared war. She had absolutely no idea how I was going to finish it. My first move wasn't to fire off an angry email or call a lawyer. In venture capital, you learn that every battle is won or lost before it begins, in the due diligence phase. I composed a polite, formal email to the HOA board's public address, requesting the minutes from the meeting where the fishing rule was allegedly changed, along with a copy of the newly filed bylaws. Linda replied herself, not from the board account, but from her personal email. Her response was curt. Meeting minutes are for board members only. The bylaws are available on the community portal. It was a blatant lie, and she wasn't even trying to hide it. I logged into the portal. The only bylaws available were the original ones from years ago, which clearly listed fishing as an approved activity. This wasn't just a power trip. It was sloppy. It smelled like a racket. I started taking long walks in the evening, intentionally striking up conversations with neighbors who were out watering their lawns or walking their dogs. At first, people were hesitant, but when I mentioned my run-in with Linda over fishing, the floodgates opened. The stories poured out, each one a small drop of poison. One single mother was fined $300 because her son's portable basketball hoop was a shade of orange deemed unharmonious. An elderly man on a fixed income received a violation. Notice because his trash cans were still at the curb at 10 a.m. instead of the mandated 9 a.m. A clear and ugly pattern emerged. The targets were almost always new families, single parents, or minorities, people she profiled as either not having the resources or the will to fight back. Meanwhile, I walked past the homes of her known friends on the board, noticing overgrown flower beds and peeling paint that would have earned anyone else a hefty fine. This was a shakedown, plain and simple. Citing the Texas Property Code, which gives every homeowner the right to inspect an HOA's financial records, I sent a certified letter to the board, formally requesting a complete financial review for the past 3 years. The response wasn't a letter. It was a furious phone call from Linda herself. "This is a campaign of harassment, Ethan," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "You are maliciously targeting me. If you continue with these frivolous and baseless demands, I will have no choice but to have the HOA's council file for a restraining order against you for stalking." Her panic was a blaring siren. People with nothing to hide don't threaten restraining orders. They welcome transparency. While she was busy trying to intimidate me, I was already doing what I do best, following the money. I started with public records. It didn't take long to find the first thread. The HOA's treasurer was her husband. The landscaping company, Whispering Gardens Landscaping, which received a staggering six-figure sum from the HOA every year, was registered to her sister. It was a classic embezzlement scheme, textbook in its arrogance. Grossly overinflated contracts were being paid to family-owned shell companies, and the budget was being padded with the slush fund generated by her fraudulent fines. But as I dug deeper, I found something else, something much, much bigger. Late one night, fueled by coffee and righteous anger, I pulled the original 2007 plat map for the Whispering Bluffs development from the county records website. I traced the history of the developer, a company called Silvergate Properties. I saw they went bankrupt during the 2008 financial crash. My VC instincts kicked in. When a developer goes bankrupt, they typically transfer ownership of the common areas, the roads, the small parks, the clubhouse, to the newly formed HOA. I began meticulously checking every single parcel transfer deed against the plat map. The file for the road transfer was there. The small parkland was there. The plot for the clubhouse was there, but the lake wasn't. The deed for Lot 101, the large parcel containing the entire lake, its shoreline, and the dock where I stood with Mila, was still sitting in the name of the defunct, ghostly corporation. My heart started pounding against my ribs. It was a detail so monumental it was almost impossible to believe. It meant that for 15 years the HOA had been acting like they owned the lake. They had been paying for its maintenance, creating rules for its use, and fining people for violating those non-existent rules. But they had absolutely no legal authority over it. It was an abandoned asset. A wild, audacious idea started to form in my mind. The kind of high-risk, high-reward asymmetric bet that I'd built my entire career on. The assets of a defunct corporation are usually bundled up and sold for pennies on the dollar to debt-holding companies. Someone, somewhere, owned the rights to that lake, and almost certainly didn't even know it. Linda thought her power came from a rule book she could write and rewrite at will. She was about to learn a brutal lesson that she didn't even own the ground the battle was being fought on. The next morning I walked into my home office, a smile spreading across my face for the first time in months. I called my lead researcher. "Find me the person who holds the debt portfolio for Silvergate Properties," I said. "Find me the owner of that lake." The hunt was the kind of complex, needle-in-a-haystack problem my mind was built to solve. My team, accustomed to tracking down obscure patents and hidden holding companies, went to work. We traced Silvergate's assets through a convoluted maze of bankruptcies, acquisitions, and asset sales. After days of navigating corporate ghosts, we finally landed on a small, obscure private equity firm in Delaware called Phoenix Asset Management. Their entire business model was buying up the portfolios of bankrupt companies, hoping to find overlooked assets that still had some value, like finding gold fillings in a skeleton. I didn't call them as a disgruntled homeowner. I called them as the managing partner of Crowell Capital, expressing interest in land investments in Texas. I played the part, discussing market trends and development opportunities before casually pivoting. My team also flagged a stray parcel in your Silvergate portfolio, Lot 101 in the Whispering Bluffs subdivision. "We're looking at water assets." The portfolio manager on the other end was audibly confused. I heard him typing. "Lot 101. Our notes have it marked as a zero-value liability," he said. "We assumed it was an unbuildable swamp or a drainage ditch." "It's not a swamp," I said calmly, letting the information hang in the air. "It's the central lake and primary amenity in a high-end housing development with an average home value of over $1 million. I could practically hear the gears turning and the dollar signs lighting up in his head. His tone shifted immediately. He started talking about commissioning a new appraisal, about its significant potential value, about marketing it. I let him finish before I cut him off. "It also has significant complications," I countered, shifting into full negotiation mode. "It's a landlocked parcel. It has no independent access. The presumed access rights of hundreds of wealthy residents create a legal and logistical nightmare. The moment you try to sell it on the open market, the HOA will sue you for adverse possession, and it'll be tied up in court for a decade, costing you hundreds of thousands in legal fees. To you, it's an unfolding liability that just became a massive headache. To me, I paused, it's a strategic acquisition. I made him a lowball, all-cash offer that was probably less than one of the homes on the lake, but it represented pure, instant profit for him and would make a giant legal migraine disappear from his books within a week. He tried to posture and negotiate, but my argument was ironclad, and he knew it. 48 hours later, the deal was done. My legal team filed the deed transfer through a new LLC I created to keep my name off the record until the time was right. I called it Annalise's Landing LLC. As I signed the final documents, I felt a powerful sense of righteous purpose. Linda used a fake rule to poison our peace. I had just used a real law to buy the ground beneath her feet. While the ink was drying, Linda, oblivious, was escalating. She called an emergency HOA meeting with a single item on the agenda to discuss taking action against my delinquency and ongoing defiance, with the stated goal of authorizing the board to begin foreclosure proceedings on my property for non-payment of the $500 fine. She was going to make a public example of me. The night before the meeting, Mila found me in my office, surrounded by plat maps and legal documents. "Are you okay, Dad? You look tired." I looked up from the freshly filed deed. The official paper that said Whisperwind Lake was mine. "Better than okay, sweetie," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I promise you, after tomorrow, things are going to be different. Nobody is ever going to ruin our morning again." The community clubhouse was packed. Linda had her spectacle. She sat at the head table like a queen on her throne, flanked by her husband and her other cronies, looking smug and powerful. She launched into a 10-minute tirade, detailing my flagrant disregard for our community's rules and standards. She finished by announcing, "Therefore, the board now moves to authorize our legal counsel to begin foreclosure proceedings against Mr. Crowell's home." A collective gasp went through the room. Foreclosure? Over a fishing fine. It was insanity. Before anyone could even vote, I stood up. "Point of order, Madam President." "You are out of order." "Mr. Crowell, sit down," she snapped. "Actually, the bylaws state a homeowner has the right to be heard before a vote concerning their property." A neighbor, the same elderly man who'd been fined for his trash cans, called out. Linda's face flushed a deep, angry red. "Fine," she spat. "You have 5 minutes. Make it quick." I walked calmly to the front of the room, holding a single manila folder. I turned and looked not at her, but at my neighbors. A few weeks ago, my daughter and I were fined $500 for violating a rule that, as it turns out, doesn't exist. I held up a copy of the official original bylaws. There is no rule against fishing. But that illegal fine got me wondering, where does all this money from these fines actually go? I held up another document. This is the incorporation paper for Whispering Gardens Landscaping. The company we pay over $100,000 a year to maintain our grounds. It's owned by Linda's sister, and the treasurer who signs the checks is Linda's husband. The fines you've all been paying for basketball hoops and bird feeders and trash cans? This isn't about rules. This is a racketeering scheme to enrich the board at your expense. That is slander. It's a lie, she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "Oh, I have proof," I said quietly. "A full forensic accounting of the board's finances has already been packaged and sent to the district attorney's office. But that's not even the main reason I'm here tonight." I pulled the final document from my folder. The deed. You see, in my investigation into the finances, I found a little clerical oversight dating back 15 years. The HOA has been making rules and acting like it owns the lake. There's just one problem. I held the deed up high for the entire room to see. You don't own it. You never have. As of 3 days ago, the legal owner of Whisperwind Lake, the shoreline, and all access points is a private company. And I own that company. Absolute dead silence. You could hear a pin drop on the cheap carpet. Linda's face went from furious red to a chalky, bloodless white. All the power, all the smug superiority, drained right out of her. You're lying, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Am I? I said, taking a step forward and placing the deed on the table directly in front of her. Read it. I turned back to my neighbors, whose expressions had shifted from shock to dawning comprehension. Linda's reign of terror is over. But to make sure this kind of corruption never happens again, I am hereby declaring the lake and its shoreline private property. Effective immediately, all community access is revoked. The room erupted. You can't do that, someone yelled from the back. I can, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the noise. It is my property. However, I am willing to grant a permanent, irrevocable access easement to the residents of Whispering Bluffs under one non-negotiable condition: the immediate resignation of Linda Prescott and every single member of this board. Right now! Every eye in the room swiveled to Linda. She was cornered, trapped, her power completely gone. Her neighbors were looking at her not with fear, but with pure, unadulterated contempt. You can't do this to me, she stammered, looking around for support that wasn't there. You did this to yourself, I said coldly. Resign, or the fences go up tomorrow morning. Her husband was the first to crack. He threw his pen on the table. I resign. The treasurer was next. I resign. One by one, her cronies abandoned her. Finally, it was just Linda, trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Through gritted teeth so low I could barely hear it, she choked out, I resign. A wave of spontaneous, joyous cheers swept through the room. It was the sound of a dictatorship falling. It was the sound of freedom. It was the sound of freedom. Linda's downfall was as swift as it was total. With the forensic accounting I provided and testimony from a dozen other residents, the DA's office moved quickly. Within a month, she, her husband, and her sister were facing multiple charges of fraud and embezzlement. In their place, the community, energized and united, elected a new, honest board of residents who actually cared about the neighborhood. True to my word, I didn't keep the lake. I worked with the new board to create the Annalise's Landing Trust, a nonprofit entity that now owns the lake in perpetuity. I structured the trust so that its sole purpose is to guarantee community access forever. The new HOA board has no power to restrict access or levy fines related to the lake. It can never be used as a weapon again. A few weeks later, the new board held a small community barbecue by the water. At the ceremony, they surprised me by presenting me with a small, simple bronze plaque that had been installed on the dock. It read, Lake Annalise, in loving memory of Annalise Crowell, who cherished this place of peace. They had renamed the lake. I hadn't even asked. Standing there reading those words, I had to fight back tears. A year has passed, and the peace in Whispering Bluffs is no longer a fragile promise. It's real. On Saturday mornings, the shore of Lake Annalise is dotted with families. Kids are kayaking, fathers and sons are fishing, and couples are just sitting on the dock, enjoying the quiet. Mila and I are there almost every weekend. Her laughter, once so rare, now echoes across the water again. She's become the lake's unofficial fishing tutor, patiently teaching the younger kids how to bait a hook and cast a line, just like her mom taught her. Watching her share that legacy, that piece of her mom, with others, has been the greatest return on any investment I've ever made. I learned that sometimes, to protect your peace, you have to be willing to go to war. But I also learned that the best victory isn't just about winning, it's about rewriting the rules so that everyone gets to win. 2. If you have your own HOA nightmare story, I'd love for you to share it in the comments below. It helps to know you're not alone. And for more stories of justice served and bullies getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you subscribe.